Generation X was raised by TV. So that meant we had a lot of different characters in our living rooms every day for our entire childhood via our favorite shows on the tube. Fast forward to 40 plus years later, and a lot of us are still watching many of these same shows on the regular thanks to streaming and DVD box sets. Many of these shows and characters were such Gen X childhood staples that it's impossible to imagine different actors playing these roles. Truth is, though, that many of our favorite TV shows didn't get it right the first time. And that means they shot pilot episodes with different cast members before bringing in the actors that made those iconic roles their own. And I have a list of 10 beloved TV characters from the 1970s and 80s that were played by the wrong actor in the pilot episode. To make this list, I only included actors and characters that I could prove with a photo or a video clip that they actually shot a pilot episode. For this reason, you will not see Fred Dryer as Sam Malone on Cheers, or Francis Fisher and Stephen Tobolowsky on Home Improvement, or Lisa Kudrow as Roz on Frasier. I also decided to keep this list focused on the Gen X childhood of the 70s and 80s, but there will be some honorable mentions for shows and characters outside of that time frame. So, with that being said, let's get this party started. Honorable mentions. The Incredible Hulk was originally played by Richard Kiel. Richard Kiel, who played Jaws in 2 James Bond movies, was originally hired by Kenneth Johnson to play the creature in the Incredible Hulk TV series. However, after just a few days of shooting the pilot episode, Johnson realized that Kiel did not have the proper physique for the role. So, Johnson let Kiel go and hired Lou Ferrigno to play the iconic character. However, there is one small shot of Kiel still in the pilot episode. Captain Christopher Pike, Star Trek. The first official pilot episode of Star Trek was titled The Cage, and it introduced Jeffrey Hunter's Christopher Pike as the captain of the Enterprise and Majel Barrett's number 1 as the first officer. But it was rejected by NBC because it was apparently, quote, too difficult to follow. The only cast member from the first pilot of Star Trek to end up on the final show was Leonard Nimoy's Spock, who had a different crew position in the very first episode. In the second pilot, titled Where No Man Has Gone Before, fans met William Shatner's Captain James T. Kirk. I have to mention that the first pilot is still considered canon because footage was used as a flashback sequence in the season 1 episode titled The Menagerie, where it was explained that the adventures of Pike and his crew took place 10 years before the original series. And I also have to mention that the current series, Strange New Worlds, is set during that 10-year time span and follows the crew from that original pilot. Jim Walsh, Beverly Hills 90210. Actor Lyman Ward, who played the dad in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, was hired for the role of Jim Walsh, the father of Brenda and Brandon Walsh, on Beverly Hills 90210. However, after filming just a few scenes in the first episode, the Fox network decided he wasn't right for the part, and they brought in James Eckhouse to take over. Officer Tom Hansen, 21 Jump Street. 21 Jump Street was one of the first hits for the Fox network when it premiered in 1987, and the police procedural made Johnny Depp a TV star. However, he was not the first actor to be cast in the role of Officer Tom Hansen. It was actually Jeff Yeager, known at the time for his performance as Kyle Bates on V, the series, who played the role in the 21 Jump Street pilot. But after they saw that unaired pilot, Fox execs weren't sold on Yeager playing the role, which meant he got cut from the series and Johnny Depp was brought in to take over. Instead of reshooting the entire pilot, though, they simply reshot Yeager's scenes with Depp instead. Willow, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Another actress besides Allison Hannigan was cast in the role of Willow Rosenberg for the unaired Buffy the Vampire Slayer pilot. Instead, actress Riff Reagan played the geek girl destined to become an all-powerful witch. However, she was recast after filming the pilot for reasons that Joss Whedon has never revealed. Dean and Suki, the Gilmore Girls. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and mention Gilmore Girls, even though it's a total millennial show from the early aughts. It starred Gen Xer Lauren Graham, so that's my excuse for including it. The original Dean in Gilmore Girls was not played by Jared Padalecki. Instead, the role went to Nathan Weatherington when they shot the pilot, But that's not the only casting change they made. Melissa McCarthy was not the original Suki. Instead, she was played by Alex Borstein in the unaired pilot. After filming, the roles of Dean and Suki were recast with Padalecki and McCarthy, and the pilot was reshot. Number 10. Howard and Joni Cunningham. Happy Days. In the original Happy Days unsold pilot, Harold Gould played Howard Cunningham and Susan Meher played Joni. This episode also featured Rick Carrot as Charles Chuck Cunningham, a character that famously disappeared from the series without explanation and was never mentioned again. This unsold pilot was filmed in late 1971 and it had the title of New Family in Town. It also featured Marion Ross as Marion, Ron Howard as Richie, and Anson Williams as Potsy. Paramount actually passed on making the show into a weekly series, but the pilot was recycled with the title Love and the Television Set, later retitled Love and the Happy Days, for presentation on the television anthology series Love American Style in 1972. That pilot episode, airing on Love American Style, got the attention of George Lucas, who then cast Howard as the lead in his film American Graffiti. This caused ABC to renew their interest in Happy Days, and they took a second look, giving it a series order in 1974. Ross, Howard, and Williams remained part of the cast, but the role of Howard Cunningham went to Tom Bosley, and Joni was played by Aaron Moran. Chuck was played by Gavin O'Herlihy and Randolph Roberts, but the character appeared in just 11 episodes before he disappeared completely in season 2. It wasn't until season 3, when Happy Days was retooled, that the previous minor character Fonzie, played by Henry Winkler, grabbed the spotlight and the show became the #1 program on television. Happy Days ran for 11 seasons from January 1974 to July 1984. All in the Family, Gloria and Meathead. Before it became the most watched TV show of the 1970s, All in the Family had 2 failed pilots, starring Carol O'Connor and Gene Stapleton as Archie and Edith. But in each pilot, there were different actors playing the roles of Gloria and Meathead. The original pilot was taped in 1968, entitled Justice for All. It was developed for ABC, but instead of Bunker, Archie and Edith's last name was Justice, and the roles of Gloria and Meathead were played by Kelly Jean Peters and Tim McIntyre. After screening the test pilot, ABC gave the producers more money to shoot a second one, titled Those Were the Days, which Norman Lear taped in 1969. The script remained the same, but the role of Gloria was played by Candice Azara and Chip Oliver played her husband. ABC ultimately passed on this series, but Lear didn't give up. He ended up taking the show to CBS, where they gave it a series order. The network did change the name of the sitcom, though, to All in the Family, and they cast Sally Struthers and Rob Reiner in the roles of Gloria and Michael Meathead Stivic. The rest is television history. Kelly and Bud Bundy, Married with Children. In the pilot episode of Married with Children, the Bundy kids, Kelly and Bud, who everyone grew to love, were originally played by totally different actors. Tina Caspery was initially chosen for the role of Kelly, and Hunter Carson was meant to play Bud. The producers made a big switch, though, before the series aired publicly, at the insistence of Ed O'Neill, aka Al Bundy. O'Neill felt a lack of chemistry with the original kids, so he requested a recast, and the producers accepted his complaint. They hired Christina Applegate and David Faustino for the roles of Kelly and Bud, and all of the scenes with the Bundy kids were shot again so the pilot episode could air on Fox. Chrissy Snow and Janet Wood, Three's Company. The classic mid-70s sitcom Three's Company actually had a total of 3 pilots, with the first 2 featuring some major casting mix-ups and totally different characters. The one constant was that John Ritter was the central figure in all 3 pilots, but in the first one, he played the role of a filmmaker named David, not a chef named Jack. What's more, both Joyce DeWitt and Suzanne Somers were completely absent. Ritter was joined by Valerie Curtin, who played Jenny, an employee at the DMV, and Suzanne Zenor, who played Samantha, an aspiring actress. The series took place in an apartment building called the Hacienda Palms, and it was located in North Hollywood. The second pilot retooled some things, adding DeWitt as florist Janet Wood, but even though they got rid of the Samantha character, the second pilot still notably lacked Summers in the role of Chrissy Snow. Instead, that role went to Susan Lanier. They also moved the setting of the show away from North Hollywood to the beach side in Santa Monica and changed the concept to more of a farce. The second pilot was generally well liked, with the exception of Lanier's portrayal of Chrissy. After putting the series on the network's schedule, ABC's Fred Silverman ordered a search for another actress to play Chrissy. The day before production of the series began, Silverman desperately watched the audition tapes again and again, fast forwarding through them quickly. And this is when he noticed Suzanne Summers' audition tape for the first time. He immediately knew she was right for the part. So, producers contacted her, and she was on the set the very next day. Number 6. David, Tommy, and Nancy Bradford. 8 is Enough. 8 is Enough had so much drama and real life tragedy when it came to casting the show that I could make an entire video about it. But for this list, we're going to focus on the pilot episode that featured Mark Hamill as oldest son David Bradford instead of Grant Goodeve, Chris English in the role of Tommy instead of Willie Ames, and the role of Nancy, played by Kimberly Beck instead of Diane Kay. Hamill shot the 8 is Enough pilot before he landed the role of Luke Skywalker in Star Wars, but it took an entire year for ABC to pick up this series and put it on the primetime schedule. But by that point, Hamill had completed filming on Star Wars and he wanted to focus on his film career. He wanted out of his contract, but he had already signed a 5-year series deal with ABC and 8 is Enough. When the network screened the pilot, though, they were unhappy with the performances of Beck and English, and they let them go and replaced them with Kay and Ames, respectively. But when it came to Hamill, the production company refused to let him out of his contract until he was seriously injured in a car accident on the night the pilot aired. Hamill suffered facial injuries, including a broken nose, and was able to use that as an excuse to leave 8 is Enough. Number 5. Cousin Larry Appleton, Perfect Strangers. Okay, this is a big one. Did you know there was another Cousin Larry? Well, actually, it was Cousin Louie. That's because it was comedian Louie Anderson who played Balky's cousin in the pilot for the 1980s sitcom Perfect Strangers. But after executives reviewed the unaired pilot, they decided the comedian just didn't have chemistry with Balky actor Bronson Pinchot. That meant that Louie Anderson was out, and after several actors came in to audition as his replacement, it was Pinchot's fellow Yale grad Mark Lynn Baker who ended up taking over the role, and they changed the character name to Larry. They also changed the show from a dialogue-driven sitcom to one that focused more on physical comedy. I really wish I had the clips of the pilot with Louie Anderson, but they have disappeared from the internet. The only thing that remains are a handful of pictures of the original duo on set while they filmed the pilot. Number 4. Gordon, Sesame Street. In 1969, the Children's Television Workshop produced an unaired test pilot for Sesame Street that was shown only to a focused group of children. The actor who played Gordon in that test pilot was uncredited and his name was lost among the production staff. When the show went into production and the first episode of Sesame Street debuted, the actor who played Gordon was Matt Robinson, who stayed in the role for 3 seasons. He was followed by Hal Miller in seasons 4 and 5, but the man who Gen X grew up knowing as Gordon was Roscoe Orman, who joined the show in season 6 and played that role for 4 decades. But the mystery of who played Gordon in the pilot sparked an online investigation among fans decades later when the show celebrated its 40th anniversary. Sesame Workshop launched an internet campaign in 2011 called The Case of the Missing Gordon in an attempt to identify the actor. In just a matter of days, the man who played Gordon in the pilot was identified as New York theater actor Garrett Saunders. Number 3. Danny Tanner, Full House. The unaired pilot of Full House is almost identical to the pilot that ended up on TV, with the notable exception of Danny Tanner looking very different. That's because the role of the series patriarch was played by John Posey, not Bob Saget. What Posey didn't know when he got that gig of the Full House pilot was that he was the second choice. Executive producers had previously worked with Saget on Bosom Buddies, where he was the warm up guy for the studio audience, and that's who they wanted in the role of Danny Tanner. But Saget had already signed up for a CBS morning program called The Morning Program, and due to that commitment, Saget wasn't available for the Full House pilot, and that's when Posey got the job. The recasting of Danny Tanner had more to do with the sudden availability of Saget than any actual failing on Posey's part. The morning program was canceled after just 9 months on the air, and that left the Full House exec's first choice for the role of Danny free just in time for them to shoot a new pilot. Posey said that losing the job came as a shock to him. Quote, "Nobody said there were problems. It seemed like everything was fine. We shot it. I learned as much as I could in a short period of time. And next thing I know, hey, you're no longer employed."
You lost my daughter? I went to work for 7 hours and you lost 33% of my children? Didn't you notice a very small person moving everything she owns out of the house? You were here, weren't you?
We were dealing with the baby, and I was moving into the large alcove.
And I was moving into Bunnyland.
All right, Joey, I want you to call the police. You drive around the neighborhood. I'm going to call DJ's friends.
And I'll go get DJ.
Number 2. Templeton Faceman Peck, The A-Team. The A-Team was one of the most iconic shows of the 1980s. So much so, I'd be willing to bet that most Gen Xers could easily name the Fab Four of this action-adventure series. There was John Hannibal Smith, played by George Peppard, B.A. Baracus, played by Mr. T, Howling Mad Murdoch, played by Dwight Schultz, and Templeton Faceman Peck, played by Dirk Benedict. But when the A-Team premiered on NBC in January 1983 after Super Bowl XVII, one of those team members was played by an actor who didn't make it past the pilot episode. In the 2-hour pilot, titled Mexican Sleigh Ride, the role of Faceman went to Tim Dunnigan. The creators of the A-Team actually had Dirk Benedict in mind for the role from the beginning, but studio executives insisted on Dunnigan. After they shot the pilot, though, those same execs watched the episode and realized that Dunnigan looked way too young to be believable as a Vietnam vet. And to make things worse, the 6'5" Dunnigan was significantly taller than the rest of the cast. Particularly, he was like 7 inches taller than Mr. T. So Dunnigan was replaced by Benedict for the rest of the show's 4-season run. Benedict also made a post-credits cameo 40 years later, well, almost 40 years later, in the 2010 A-Team movie. And I'd also like to mention that Dirk Benedict was 5-year-old me's very first crush.
Looking for John Smith? John! Hey, John, where are you? Hey, it's me.
He's on us. Colonel Lynch. He had BA's pad 2 hours ago with 6 MPs. They're all around my place like a bunch of goonies at a supermarket opening.
How'd he trace us?
Maybe the senator's kid talked. I never thought he had all his lights on. Get a chance to play it for Colonel Lynch.
That's him. John Hannibal Smith.
Come on, get him. Go, go, go!
The number 1 TV character from our Gen X childhood that was played by a different actor in the pilot is Carol Seaver on Growing Pains. For 7 seasons, we all remember Tracy Gold playing the role of Carol, the middle child of the Seaver family, with an older brother named Mike, played by Kirk Cameron, and a younger brother named Ben, played by Jeremy Miller. Then, of course, there were the parents, Jason and Maggie, played by Alan Thicke and Joanna Kearns. But what many fans may not know is that Carol looked very different in the Growing Pains on-aired pilot. That's because she was not played by Tracy Gold. Instead, the role of Carol went to Elizabeth Ward. But after the pilot was shown to test audiences with poor results, the decision was made to replace Ward with Gold, who had originally auditioned for the part but had lost it to Ward. All scenes that involved Carol Seaver had to be reshot, but there is one exception. When you watch the pilot episode that did actually air on ABC, in the police station scene at the end of that episode, Ward can still be seen loitering in the background.
Yo!
Something wrong, Mom?
Nothing's wrong. I guess I just wonder what's going on in your heads.
Oh, well, it says here that as the universe expands, all matter is slowly degenerating into an increasingly disorganized state.
And that's my list of beloved 1970s and 80s TV characters who were played by the wrong actor in the pilot. Please let me know what you think in the comments section below, and if you haven't already, like and subscribe if you'd like to see more videos just like this one. Okay, bye!